The views expressed on the following broadcasts do not necessarily reflect those of KHLT, Take 12 Radio, or our affiliates. The opinions on this show should not be considered as medical, psychological, or professional advice and are those of the host, co-host, and guest. Take 12 Radio and KHLT Recovery Broadcasting are not affiliated with any particular 12-step fellowship.
One day at a time with its failures and fears, with portion of pain and burden of care, we must meet.
Welcome to Walking Through the Language of the Heart, a journey into the Grapevine writings of Alcoholics Anonymous co-founder Bill W. And now, here are your co-hosts, Chris S. and the Monty'man.
Yes, after a break from celebrating eating too much turkey and that kind of thing. Chris, are you a turkey guy or a ham guy?
Yeah, turkey usually. I'll take a turkey. Turkey's something you can't eat a lot. You know, you can't eat it like 25 times a year, but it's good for the holidays.
Yeah, it is. It is. Yeah, I'm a turkey guy too. My wife's a ham person, but So Thanksgiving has come and gone, and now we are moving into not step 12, but month 12, and we haven't yet another episode. Episode, I'm not, what is this, 55 maybe? Something like that. Going through the book, The Language of the Heart, listeners. Bill W.'s Grapevine writings from 1944 to 1970. And dare we launch forth on another chapter, another article?
Absolutely, Monty. We are gluttons for punishment. I will say that we're more than halfway through.
Yay!
Finally, we're more than halfway through. But I'm telling you, I'm getting a lot out of this. There's nobody that's getting more out of this than me. I'm telling you.
Yeah,
it's so much. It's so much fun. I have such a deeper perspective of Alcoholics Anonymous and how it was architected. It's just I've been having a lot of fun. So anyway, tonight we're February 1954. I'm still not born yet, Monty. And
me either.
The name of the article is Another Fragment of History: Sister Ignatia and Dr. Bob. Now, Dr. Bob is dead maybe 4 years now, but he would go to the hospital and he had a partner in crime, for the 12-step. He would do a lot of his 12-step work in the hospital. He'd get an alcoholic would come, they'd put him in the room, Sister Ignatia would kind of be in charge, and Doc would get the boys together to come in, and they'd all tell their story and try to hijack somebody into the local recovery group in Akron, and it really was a beautiful process. Listen, I'm a ginormous Bill Wilson fan, but I'm also a Dr. Bob fan. There's some things that he did, he concentrated on that we benefit from today. Home group, sponsorship, taking somebody through the steps. There's not a lot of documented evidence that Bill Wilson was taking people through the steps. There is a ton of documented evidence that Dr. Bob was. I'm sure Bill was, but I mean, the documentation is overwhelming about how Dr. Bob would work with.
Yeah,
there were a lot of surviving people. So anyway, let's get going on the article. Sister Ignatia and Dr. Bob. It was December 13th, 1953. The occasion was the first anniversary of the opening of Rosary Hall, the newly remodeled alcoholic ward at Cleveland's famed St. Vincent's Charity Hospital. It had been a great AA meeting. The small auditorium was crammed with alcoholics and their friends. So was the balcony. 1,000 people now rose to their feet, clapping wildly. A thousand people, Monty, in a meeting. I've been to meetings with 1,000 people.
Right.
That you're in a meeting.
Yeah.
The slight figure of a nun in a gray habit reluctantly approached the lectern's microphone. The uproar redoubled, then suddenly subsided as the little nun commenced to give her thanks. She was embarrassed, too, for had not the program she'd helped write for the occasion definitely stated that the Sisters of Charity and the members of Alcoholics Anonymous who have assisted decline all individual credit. Sister Ignatia's attempted anonymity was busted wide open, for no one there wanted to let her get away with it this time. And anyway, she was just about as anonymous in that part of our AA world as baseball's Cleveland Indians. This was a treat to her which had been years in the making. And again, Dr. Bob, pretty much, I'm not sure what kind of proctology he continued to practice after he got sober, but what he was really into was working with alcoholics. And Sister Ignatia was right there with him. She became such a good partner in crime. As I sat watching this scene, I vividly remembered Dr. Bob's struggles to start the Akron AA Group Number 1, and what this dear nun and her Sisters of Charity at St. Augustine had done to make that possible. I tried to envision all the vast consequences which have since flowed from their early effort. Seeking hospitalization for his newfound prospects, Dr. Bob, I recalled, had begged one Akron institution after another to take them in. 2 hospitals had tried for it, finally gave up in favor of folks with broken legs, ailing gallbladders, etc. Really sick people, and people with money too.
Yeah, I bet.
You know how that is. Then in desperation, the good doctor bethought. There's a word you don't hear too much anymore. Well, Monty, let's start using that word, bethought. Okay. The good doctor bethought himself of Sister Ignatia, that shy but nun who handled admissions at St. Thomas Hospital in Akron, where he had occasionally operated. In an atmosphere of some secrecy, he approached her with his proposal. In nothing flat, he got results. This rare pair immediately bootlegged a shaking alkie into a tiny 2-bed ward. Because the new customer kicked like a steer at this glaring lack of privacy for his delicate condition, Sister Ignatia moved him into the hospital's flower room. Here, AA's co-founder Bob and Sister Ignatia ministered to this newcomer, who presently left his bed for the world outside, there to mend his ways and his broken life. So this was not unusual, Monty. Like you and I are probably used to the way recovery fellowships are now. There's a process, and it can take months and months and years sometimes to move through specific steps, depending where you are. The more documentation I've read on Dr. Bob, he would take an afternoon.
Yeah.
To take you through the steps. He would minister to you. You would turn your life over to God. You would promise you'd go make amends. He'd cut you loose and you'd be sober. you know, it was kind of amazing, but it worked.
Do you think there was a sense of urgency that maybe we've lost somewhat today?
I think the meetings are good. You can't shake a stick without hitting a meeting. If there's a town with 10,000 people, there's multiple meetings. And I think that's good, but it's also bad because you're not afforded, a lot of times you're not afforded that heavy duty one-on-one.
Yeah.
You're kind of expected to go to the meeting and the meeting will do the magic. When back in the early days, it was one-on-one or it was the drunks visiting you in the hospital, and there was quite a bit of attention paid to you specifically. You didn't just sit in a room listening to people talk. In the early days, it was very hands-on. You would get your treatment, for alcoholism, and then they would expect you to go out and treat other people like right away.
So I I asked somebody here recently, I said, when they say keep coming back, it works. Do you know what the it is? And they didn't. And I was like, really? I said, I'll tell you what the it is. And then I proceeded to tell them. But it's amazing to me how many people really don't know what the it is. It's not drinking bad coffee. That's for sure.
The biggest delusion out there, and many people die because of this delusion, is that the meetings treat your alcoholism.
Yeah.
The meetings are the waiting room, and the 12 steps are the operation. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like now so many people who have gone to meetings and sat there and listened and wondered what the heck they were doing there and stopped going, those people are crazy, and then drank themselves to death. It's unfortunate. They haven't, they were never shoved into the operating room. They were allowed to languish in the waiting room.
In the waiting room. Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Though Sister Ignatia and Dr. Bob, God had wrought a divine conspiracy of medicine, religion, and Alcoholics Anonymous, which was to bring sobriety within reach of more than 5,000 alcoholics who were to pass through the alcoholic ward of St. Thomas up to the time of Dr. Bob's death in 1950. But when that first customer was shaking it out in the flower room way back there in 1939, the trustees of the hospital little guessed that St. Thomas had become the first religious institution ever to open its doors to AA. And the first AA meeting is still celebrated out there. It was on Zoom for a while. I'm not sure it's in the same hospital, but AA group number 1 in Akron is still quite a home group.
Wow.
Not long before Dr. Bob passed out of our sight and hearing, I was asked to inscribe a plaque which could always be seen on the wall of the alcoholic ward and which would commemorate the great events which there took place. 2 years after Dr. Bob's death, Sister Ignatia was transferred by the order to which she belongs to Charity Hospital in Cleveland. But no account of the activity of church hospitals in this area would be complete without a recital of what happened at Charity Hospital over the years before her arrival there. Old-time AAs will recall the wonderful publicity which the Cleveland Plain Dealer gave us in the fall of 1939. When these stories broke, there was scarcely a score of AAs in the whole town, because the pieces appearing on the Cleveland Plain Dealer's editorial page were accompanied by strong editorials and ran consecutively for about 10 days. The ensuing excitement in the town was immense. A little band of alcoholics, some of them dry-only monks, were flooded by hundreds of telephone calls and frantic pleas for help. The Plain Dealer had said to the good people of Cleveland, "Come and get it." And they certainly did. We've talked about this, Monty. There were certain periods of time where publicity exploded the fellowship, quadrupled the size of the fellowship almost overnight. And people were expected to do the 12-step work necessary to get all these newcomers through the steps as they were at that time. Yeah. They still call them 12-step calls, but somebody sober a couple months all of a sudden had to work with 15 new alcoholics.
Right. Right.
Try doing that today without getting, criticism. But they had no choice really back then.
When in fact, before we came on the show tonight, I was doing 4-step work with one of my sponsees, and I was like, okay, so you got your highlighter, you got your pen. Now, when I tell you to highlight or when I tell you to underline, highlight, right? So I'm doing this. I go, did you get that? And he goes, oh, you want me to highlight? And I'm like, okay. All right. What did I just say? Yeah, I said, listen, one of the reasons that I do that and I insist on it is because this is also training ground for you to turn around and take this material and for you to teach it and for you to give it away. And you need to have these notes and, of course, take your own notes too. But these are areas that I think that, really need to be passed on, and so I want you to have them, and and I think when we're sponsoring people, isn't that true? I mean, we are preparing them to sponsor others. It's not just for their sobriety.
One of the things that I do is, and I'm in the middle of doing this with one of my really favorite guys in the world, is I go through the big book with 3 different color highlighters. I highlight the instructions, I highlight the spiritual principles in a different color, and I highlight the promises in a different color. And something like that is a perfect tool now to use to take someone through the 12 steps, using the literature as a backup. And it's kind of the same thing that you're basically saying.
Yeah. So you do instructions, spiritual principles, and promises, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that a lot. That is really good.
So I have a book with that's all it has in it.
Yeah.
Is those three different colors, and that'll be the book I use if someone comes over here and wants information on the first step or the fourth step or whatever.
Excellent.
So okay, this startling development ushered in an entirely new phase of AA. Pioneering had gone on since 1935, and the AA book was already off the press, but growth in Akron and New York had been discouragingly slow. A handful of Clevelanders had dried up by contact with Akron, but held no meeting of their own until early 1939. It was then commonly supposed that nobody but graybeards could look after new people. The supply of seasoned AAs in Cleveland was of course painfully small. What could these few do with the hundreds of alcoholics who now descended on them like a landslide? Was mass production of sobriety possible? It's really interesting. There's a lot of information on the Cleveland genesis of AA group number 3, and a man named Clarence Snyder, who lived into the 80s, was part of that group. And Clarence was a character. Okay, so I don't buy every single thing that Clarence shares, but he shared the story of the Cleveland group. And here's the short story he would share. They would all get in the car and they would drive from Cleveland all the way down to Akron for the AA meeting every week. And it got to a point where some of them said, I'm tired of driving, I don't know, what is it, 2 hours? I don't know what it is, from one city to another. Let's start our own meeting. And listen, let's not have it an Oxford group meeting. Let's call it Alcoholics Anonymous after the name of the book. This is the story Clarence tells. And he said Dr. Bob and everybody freaked out that they were doing this. Okay. And they actually drove up to Cleveland with baseball bats to stop this meeting from starting.
Wow.
This is the story that Clarence, he said it started with a riot. AA group number 3 started with a riot. Now you don't find this in the conference approved literature. Bill's not telling any of the story. I don't even know how accurate it is. Clarence was a character, but let's say part of it is true. That was the breaking off from the Oxford group in 1939. Akron still was following the Oxford group, meetings and formats and everything up until that time.
That's great. I love it.
And Clarence would forever after say he started AA. Because he would. He said it was the first meeting that called itself Alcoholics Anonymous, and he credited himself with starting AA. So that's the kind of character he was. But anyway, we needed every one of these lunatics.
You bet.
Well, those early Clevelanders proved that it was. Cases were dumped into hospitals willy-nilly all over town. Whether their hospital bills would be paid, no one knew. An AA would appear at a new man's bedside, watch him, snatch him out, and take him to a meeting. The new man would thereupon rush to another bedside with the glad tidings. Then and there it was discovered that very new people could drive the opening wedge into a fresh one almost as well as anybody. Out of this confused scramble, there soon evolved the great idea of organized personal sponsorship for each and every new man and woman. That's an important paragraph.
Wow.
It says two things that are very important. One is that a new person can help a new person as well as anybody.
Yeah.
And it also was the development of the structure around what we currently
Called sponsor.
describe as sponsorship. Very interesting paragraph. Meanwhile, Cleveland's membership soared to hundreds in a matter of months. There at Cleveland in the winter of 1939, they proved that mass production of society was a glad fact. This is Cleveland's great and rightful claim to distinction as a pioneer group. Now, Bill Wilson never gave Clarence credit for starting Alcoholics Anonymous or starting the first AA group.
Yeah.
And truly, in New York, they'd backed away from the Oxford group before 1939. They were summarily invited out of the Oxford group meetings.
Yeah.
Because bringing active drunks into meetings is always a disruption, and that was happening quite often. And Sam Shoemaker himself, who we really do consider a saint in AA, was one of the voices that was asking Bill to take his drunks elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
But this prodigious effort had to have help from the town's hospitals. Such amazing results could have been obtained in no other way. As in Akron, after the excitement died down, some of the hospitals got weary of drunks, but Cleveland's charity hospital never did. Since 1940, it has admitted alcoholics and has provided a ward for them. Though Cleveland was lacking a Dr. Bob, the charity ward did nevertheless prosper nobly under the guidance and devoted interest of Sister Victorian and Father Nagel, the hospital's chaplain. Though work with the alcoholics could take up only a fraction of their time, and though Father Nagel suffered constantly from ill health, they continued to press on with such a result that their work will always stand as a shining mark in our annals. St. John's Hospital in Cleveland, too, did provide a two-bed ward for a time under the devoted Sister Merkhead, who was finally transferred to Akron, where she became associated with Sister Ignatia and Dr. Bob. With the arrival of Sister Ignatia at Cleveland's Charity Hospital in 1952, plenty more began to happen. Suddenly, thousands of AAs from near and far who had sobered up in these wonderful institutions began to realize that their long-standing debt of gratitude. Permission was obtained to modernize completely the battered old ward at Charity. Sister Ignatia, helped by the hospital authorities and the sisters of her order, and further buttressed an enthusiastic committee of AAs who went to work. Money and much more flowed in. With special dispensation from their representative unions, AA carpenters, plumbers, and electricians worked long nights. When they were done, the ward gleamed. It was possessed of every modern device. Neither were two indispensable adjuncts forgotten: the chapel and the coffee bar. A plumbing inspector summed it all up when, after looking at this astonishing result, he remarked, "This was no professional job. The folks who worked on this had their hearts in it." More than $60,000 in funds and night work was thus expended on this urgent labor of love. Wow. That's pretty amazing. 1952, there was enough alcoholics to cover all of the trades.
Yeah.
Plumbing, electrical. Oh, man. In one short year since Sister Ignatia came to Charity, 1,000 alcoholics have seen the light of their new day. Sister Ignatia, who has kept in touch with many of them, believes that about 700 are sober at this moment. So let's say 1,000 people went through, 700 were sober. Monty, what they were doing in the early days, and listen, they were getting really hopeless alcoholics. They were getting the people who had gone down the scale.
Yeah.
But this very, very quick introduction to spirituality and the demonstration of turning one's life and will over to the care of God, provided 70% recovery rate. Isn't that something?
Yeah, and so I'm thinking about. We've talked about this before. How the push for the spiritual needed to kind of step aside so they could talk about the medical, and more people were hooked on that, and then they were willing to accept the spiritual. And yet there's part of this when I read this stuff, and even when I read in how it works, where God is being talked about before we ever start the steps.
Yeah. In the earlier iteration of this, absolutely.
Yeah.
And listen, if you're really, really desperate, you're going to be more open-minded.
Sure. Yeah. It depends on how much trouble you're in, as you
How
would
much
put it.
trouble you're in. Yeah. If you still got a Ferrari and a hot tub, it's a whole different story. Is it any wonder then that the anniversary meeting of the opening of Rosary Hall was turned into a declaration of our personal love for Sister Ignatia and all her works? If the plumbing inspector had been present at this great meeting, he would again exclaimed, "This is no professional job. It comes from the heart." And I love our history. Without so many of these moving parts of our history, we're not here today.
Yeah.
You know what I mean, Monty?
Yeah. When I read stuff like this, and certainly the message of the gospel, the salvation message that it encompasses is, really at the core of so much of this. But when I read this kind of thing, I'm not hearing the gospel so much as I am hearing a lot of other moving parts that are from a religious body, a lot of other workings of the faith community. I mean, they had to do a lot of stuff. And so when I hear somebody read, or I read, be quick to see where religious people are right, make use of what they offer, I think about stuff like this. Look at all the stuff that they were offering. It wasn't just the message in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. It was broader than that, if you can get broader than that. You know what I'm saying? There was so much more to it.
I do.
Yeah.
I do. I'm a great a great fan of and study quite a lot of first century Christianity.
Yeah.
And within, I'm talking the Acts of the Apostles covers some of it. The letters of Paul cover some of it, but there's some other historical works that you can get your hands on that'll give you an idea of what was going on within the Christian groups in the first century. This is the second and third generation after the apostles, and they had these communities, they had these fellowships where you were all in, Monty. It wasn't like you were going to church on Sunday for an hour.
Right.
You were all in on this way of life, and really that's what the Oxford Group was built on, and really that's where Alcoholics Anonymous learned its spirituality from a group that tried to emulate first century Christianity and all that it encompassed.
Yeah.
So yeah, the debt to Christianity is great. Was Bill Wilson wise to pull a lot of that direct reference to Christianity, pull it a little bit further away, and term it spirituality and color it spiritual? Probably.
Sure.
Because the doors were now wide open.
Right.
And probably more people were saved. And listen, God is not going to make too hard terms with those who seek Him.
That's right. That's right.
So what Bill did, I don't believe impacted in a negative way anyone's relationship with God. God will reveal Himself when we seek Him.
Yeah.
And want Him enough is what the book says.
Yeah. 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 I love it. Well, sometimes you got to bring certain things into the back door, but it still gets in the building, right?
That's a great way of putting it. Absolutely. Yeah. We can thank a lot of different people, and the nun, Sister Ignatia, in the first 10 years of AA, she did as much 12-step work as any AA member.
Right. Oh, gee. I don't know how long it's been since Father Martin passed away, but gollies, I mean, that was Father Martin was actually one of my first experiences with anybody from Catholicism. I really hadn't scratched any kind of surface with Catholicism until I got into it was a DUI class, and they were showing Father Martin films, and I wasn't sold on the 12 steps. I wasn't an AA evangelist or anything. I was just new to this DUI class, and I was fascinated by this guy. I took to it right away.
A great orator, a great speaker,
Yeah.
And he also was a topic speaker. So you can get your hands on Father Martin talks on practically any topic. Surrender, gratitude. I mean,
Yeah.
and he'll blow the topic away. He was amazing. He's been going about 20 years
About
now.
20 years now.
And
Wow.
Father Martin's Ashley is still up and running though. The treatment center that he was instrumental in starting.
Oh, wow.
Is still up and running in Maryland, and does a great job.
Wow.
But you want to hear the voice of Catholicism and the recovery materials. Read the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions critically, asking looking for Catholicism in the voicing of some of the paragraphs, and you'll see it, because during the writing, the period of time when Bill was writing it, he was taking instruction from and really developing a very, very close relationship with Father Ed Dowling,
Yeah.
who was a Catholic priest.
Yeah. Yeah. So those overtones are going to be in there. Great
They
stuff. Another great show, my friend. Thank you so much. Yeah, I don't know. I can't say enough about the work that we're doing here. If for no other reason than just you and I getting a whole lot out of it, and jump aboard.
So I'm really excited in the next few weeks to come. We're starting to get into the Yale lectures and the Yale writings.
Right.
And this of course was the Yale School on Alcohol Studies, and how they dragged Bill into a lot of their research and stuff, and that's going to be fascinating. Some of his most controversial writing is in the Yale lectures. Some of the things that ruffles people's feathers are in the Yale lectures. One of them is, can a non-alcoholic be an AA member? No. That's you find that in the Yale lectures.
Let's ruffle some feathers. All right.
Let's ruffle them up.
I like it. All right, Chris. Listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. Remember, you can catch up on all of these shows, all of this series, along with some others that Chris and I have done and provided for you for fun and for free, all at take12radio.com. All right. Until our next broadcast, this is the Monty'man, along with Chris S., and we are wishing God's perfect serenity for you. Bye-bye now, my friends. For more recovery workshops with Chris S. and the Monty'man, visit our website at take12radio.com and click on the Recovery Workshops banner.
This has been a broadcast of Take 12 Recovery Radio and KHLT Recovery Broadcasting.
This has been a Chicken and a Pig production.
Kitty, 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 kitty. Meow, meow, meow.
Woof, woof.